Dante, I want people to listen to what he said there, J.D. Vance. He's essentially saying only the president gets to decide whether this act can be used in the way that he wants to use it. But he also then says that the judge is saying you can't deport people, which is not what the judge is saying at all. He's just saying the use of this particular act may not be, in this circumstance, the way that you can deport people. Tell us more about Marbury versus Madison and whether judges have a role in interpreting the law.
The judicial branch, their job is interpretation of the law, and that's exactly what they did here. What they said is this law requires an invasion or act of war, and we interpret that to mean you have to actively be at war. You can't, as Donald Trump says, come down an escalator and say, oh, people are coming into our country, raping our women and killing us, and that means it's an act of war. No, it has to actually meet that definition, and that's the court's job. The president has the right to decide his agenda and kind of influence public policy, but when it comes down to the application of law, that's the court's job, and that's what they did here.
Can I debate this point? Because I understand your point, and you and I have a disagreement about these individual district court judges, but when you think about what's happened in this country, millions of people have come in. It's the biggest invasion in the history of the United States. We've never been invaded this way, number one.
Scott?
These illegal aliens, and they are predatory. It is an incursion. And I would ask you to ask any of the families who've lost loved ones if they think maybe that we are at war with the people who have come here, who have committed violent acts, who have murdered people, who have raped people, who have human trafficked people. It is a disaster what's happened in this country, and the president is trying to pull every lever that's on the books to take care of it. And these individual judges are overstepping. What you're essentially saying is that the president, who is the commander in chief, cannot determine when we are being invaded. An individual district court judge is going to decide that? No, thank you.
Can I just ask a simple question? Who gets to decide whether the United States is at war
or not?
The
president, in my opinion.
No.
If we're being invaded, actually, I want the commander-in-chief to know.
Scott, no. It's actually the Congress.
You're asking if we're being invaded.
I'm asking.
You want to call Congress and see if we're being invaded?
I'm asking a basic constitutional
We'll be taken over before they ever get to the committee.
Who gets to decide whether the United States is at war? The answer is Congress.
I'm talking about if we're being invaded.
When the president says we're at war, he has to
show we're actively at war.
And
not
really, what he needs to do is go to Congress.
Well, you guys discuss in the committee. We'll let in another 20 minutes.
Wait a second, though. I thought the genius of our system was that we weren't beholden to one guy's opinion. That the genius of the American system of government was that we had three co-equal branches, and in those co-equal branches, decisions were made about how we go about doing things. Now, we want to tear that to shreds so that we can kowtow to one guy's opinion. Then we are in a monarchy. We're being ruled.
He's the commander-in-chief.
Did you guys have the same problem with the president authorizing strikes on the Houthis on the grounds that Congress hadn't authorized this war? You didn't, because we understand that the president has a job, and his job is to protect the citizens of this country. We know that Tren de Aragua is deeply embedded in the Maduro regime.
Okay, hold on a second.
We know that there's...
Actually, we don't know that.
Of course we know that.
And actually, there's reporting that even this administration analyzed that very question, and they found that actually Tren de Aragua was not being directed to come into the country by the Maduro regime. So the idea that that is...
That's not what I said, but they are deeply embedded in the highest levels of that government.
Okay, even if that were true, what is the distinction between strikes, and this is actually a big question that the United States has faced many times, and many people will debate this, right? So what's the distinction between strikes and whether the United States is actually at war with an entity or a nation? And there is a distinction. Now, nobody is saying here Trump can't deport people, because Barack Obama deported a lot of people.
And that's
Sochi.
Yeah,
you remember this.
Yeah.
He deported a lot of people, and he did so based on the existing law. It is possible to do.
It is not.
It is not.
It's not an applicable law.
That's right. Go ahead. As a lawyer, I would like an answer to that.
Determination that law has to be used at wartime when there's an invasion.
But war's different than it was in 1812.
No, we cannot use colloquialisms to say, we're generally at war.
The Houthis are not a country, and yet we're bombing them.
But let's be clear about this.
We're being invaded
that Trump
every day.
the
Well, we were.
ability to
Trump fixed
deport
it, but-
people. He has the ability to deport people, and he should, right? There was a lot of people coming in that should not be here. He has the right to do that. But he's trying to use this act to get around due process. And the court is saying this act does not apply. They're not telling him not to deport. They're saying use the process that's in place because this act does not apply.
As much bureaucracy and red tape as possible to keep
it's not
everybody.
bureaucracy. It's not red tape.
It's the law.
What we're trying to do is use the law. The law. I mean, look, is it such a big problem to say you can do things, but you have to do them lawfully? There's a process.
We
to
think
them.
this is lawful.
But it's not.
No, but the
It's
court
not.
just said it's
one
not.
judge, one stupid judge, and I want to see what the rest of them say.
You know, it's
Yes.
stupid. You know
Why
what
is
else
the
that's
judge
for?
stupid?
I
Because he
guess we have to
disagrees with
remind
the
everybody
assessment
here
of
that
Donald
Trump
Trump.
appointed this judge.
I don't care.
Okay?
Again,